I waited at the airport gate with 2 plane tickets, a white sundress, and a heart full of dreams. But he never showed. Instead, he posted a selfie from our honeymoon suite with his mother. That was the moment I knew I was not the wife. I was the backup. But he had no idea. I own more of his precious company than he realized. Hello, I am Claire. And this is the story of how I went from being a forgotten bride to the woman who took back her name, her power, and everything we built, right from under the people who thought I would break. When I first met Daniel, it felt like stepping into a dream where every page had already been written, and I had just found the right chapter. We were 2 minds with a shared hunger, ambition, independence, and the thrill of building something from nothing. The kind of love that does not just make your heart beat faster, but makes you believe in forever. We met during a corporate startup incubator in San Diego. I had pitched a product line for luxury eco-skincare, and he was there representing a family logistics business, trying to branch into new markets. He asked one question during my presentation, sharp but respectful, and the spark began. We debated ethics and entrepreneurship over coffee, fell into deep conversations, and then into something deeper, each other. 3 months later, we registered a new LLC together. 3 more. We were living together in a cozy loft downtown, holding hands across boardroom tables and whispering about dreams long after midnight. It was not perfect, but it felt right. We built our brand, Everglow Essentials, from scratch. Daniel handled supply chain and finances. I led product development, branding, and client outreach. We bootstrapped it all. Our savings, our late nights, our failures. And when we landed our first big national partnership, we celebrated on the roof with cheap champagne and a list of places we would travel once we got married. The proposal was simple. On the same rooftop, a ring nestled in a travel journal. "Let's keep building," he said. I said yes, tears in my eyes. But behind the glow of our partnership, something else was always there, her. Evelyn, his mother. From the first day she visited our office, I could feel her eyes judging every fabric choice, every color, every decision. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "Interesting choice," she would say when I shared packaging designs. Or, "I suppose the market will decide," when I mentioned our new vegan formula. To Daniel, she was just being practical. "That's just Mom," he would say. "She's hard to impress." But to me, it was clearer than sunlight. She did not want a partner for her son. She wanted an accessory. And I would never play that role. I tried. I listened. I softened myself around her. I let her critique my pitch decks and comment on my clothes. I thought marriage would bring peace. It did not. The wedding was beautiful on paper. A vineyard ceremony, delicate lace, handwritten vows. But something felt off from the morning. Evelyn had insisted on helping plan everything and took over with the precision of a CEO. "It should be classic, not trendy," she had said when I wanted peonies instead of roses. The morning of, she arrived in a dress only 2 shades lighter than mine. "It's cream," she said innocently. "Not white." Daniel did not notice. Or, he did not want to. But I brushed it off. I was marrying the man I loved. The man I built a business with. The man who, hours later, held my hands and promised, "It's you and me. Always." The plan was Bora Bora. 2 weeks. No laptops. No spreadsheets. Just us. We booked the trip 6 months in advance. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in our hotel room to an empty bed and a single note. "Had to take care of something. We'll meet you at the airport." I dressed, packed, and waited. And waited. And then my phone buzzed. A photo. From Daniel's account. He and Evelyn. In Bora Bora. Captioned, "A mother-son retreat, celebrating the strongest bond in my life." No tag. No mention of me. Nothing. I stood in the terminal. White sundress. Passport in hand. Watching our honeymoon happen on Instagram, with me erased. I did not cry. Not there. Not yet. I turned around. Called a car. Went straight to our office. And I started packing. Not my things. Our documents. Contracts. IP filings, internal memos, all the paperwork Daniel had always ignored. Because I handled it. And that meant my name was on all of it. What Daniel never knew was that months before our wedding, I had spoken to our lawyer about company structure. To protect both of us, I said. Because we were blending love and business. He agreed. And our lawyer advised us to assign ownership percentages based on initial investment and labor breakdown. Daniel had invested more capital, but I had brought in all the early clients. I had written every grant. I had worked 3 freelance jobs to fund our R&D. And legally, I owned 62%. So when he took the honeymoon with his mother, I took the business. Not out of rage, but out of clarity. Because if I could be left behind so easily by the man I built everything with, then it was never really ours, was it? It was mine. Part 1. The vow and the violation. Unchanged content. Part 2. The quiet exit. Unchanged content. To be continued in Part 3. Part 3. The power shift. The silence that followed my refusal to meet Daniel felt like a held breath. But beneath that calm was a storm gathering strength, because I knew him. And I knew Evelyn. They would not go quietly. 2 days after our viral campaign launched, I received a legal notice. Daniel was contesting the ownership distribution, claiming I had manipulated the filings, that I had taken advantage of his trust, that I had forged signatures. I stared at the envelope, my heart racing, not from fear, but fury. This was not just a betrayal of our business partnership. This was war waged from a place of wounded pride, a mother's whispers, and a man's refusal to accept that the woman he left behind was no longer willing to be silent. I called Jason, our lawyer. "Let them come," I said. I kept everything. Every email, every signature, every timestamp. What Daniel and Evelyn did not understand was that I had always expected this moment. Because women like me, we build, but we also protect. When the court date arrived, I walked into the courtroom not as a scorned wife, but as the CEO of a company they had underestimated. Dressed in a slate blue pantsuit, I held my head high. Daniel, in contrast, looked pale and tight-lipped. Evelyn sat behind him, lips pursed like she was attending a funeral. I greeted the judge clearly and professionally. Presented every document, every bank transfer, every email thread with Daniel's signature authorizing my lead role. And then Jason stood and played the final card, a recorded Zoom call from our pre-wedding consultation, where Daniel said, on the record, "Claire's doing all the heavy lifting. Honestly, she deserves more equity. I'm just here to support her." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked impressed. Evelyn stood up and tried to object, something about coercion, about manipulation, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. The ruling was swift. I retained 62% ownership. The court dismissed Daniel's claims with prejudice. Outside the courthouse, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Reporters tried to get my attention. "Claire, do you have a statement?" I paused only to say, "Reclaim your power. Do not let anyone steal it, not even the people you once trusted the most." And I walked away. The next morning, Daniel showed up at my office. Not with threats, but with a bouquet. "Please," he said. "I made a mistake." I looked at the flowers, then at him. "You did not make a mistake, Daniel. You made a decision." He stepped closer. I was scared. I let my mom get in my head. I thought. "You thought I would forgive you." "Again," I interrupted. "But Daniel, I forgave you the day I walked away. What you're asking for now is permission to re-enter the life you walked out on. And that, you do not get." He looked wounded, but I had no more space left for his hurt. Only mine. "You chose her on our wedding week," I said. "So I chose me." He left, bouquet wilting in his hand. I closed the door and smiled. Because strength? It is not loud. It is quiet, steady, and, sometimes, dressed in a slate blue pantsuit holding court transcripts. In the weeks following Daniel's final visit, peace returned, but not the kind that feels like rest. This peace was earned. It came with sore feet, long hours, and the slow, deliberate rebuilding of everything I had once believed was shared. The business thrived under the new leadership. I expanded our operations, secured a warehouse space near the coast, and onboarded 2 new chemists, both women who had once been passed over for promotions in male-dominated labs. We were not just making skincare anymore. We were making a statement. Everglow Essentials became more than a brand. It became a movement. Our social pages flooded with stories of women who had walked away from betrayal, abuse, and belittlement. The tag #EverglowRise started trending. Orders doubled, then tripled. We were becoming something Evelyn could never manipulate, something Daniel could never own. But healing is not a straight road. At night, I still replayed the rooftop proposal. The warmth in his voice when he called me his partner. The look in his eyes when he slipped the ring on my finger. I missed who he pretended to be. And sometimes that was the hardest part, grieving someone who never really existed. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. "Claire? It's Melanie. I used to work under Evelyn. Can we talk?" She came to my office looking nervous, her fingers clenched around a folder. I don't want anything," she said quickly. "But I thought you should see this." Inside the folder were emails. Dozens of them. Evelyn's private correspondence with Daniel, dating back months before our wedding. It was all there, discussions about restructuring the business, minimizing my role, slowly removing my name from the brand. Even their plan to use the honeymoon as a PR move, under the guise of a family story. I had suspected, but seeing it spelled out in ink, it made my skin go cold. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Melanie shrugged, her voice trembling. "Because I watched her destroy too many women. And you beat her. You should know the whole truth." I thanked her. And when she left, I sat alone for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it did not. That weekend, I hosted our first in-person retreat for the Everglow team. A beach house filled with laughter, purpose, and unity. We meditated at sunrise, held strategy sessions in hammocks, and cooked meals together in a sunlit kitchen. One evening, as we sat around the fire pit, one of the interns asked me, "What made you keep going? After everything?" I looked at the waves, the flame, the sky. "Because if I stopped," I said, "they would have won." That night, I wrote a letter to Daniel. Not to send. To release. "Dear Daniel, you were the lesson I did not know I needed. The mirror that showed me who I was when I forgot. I built a world with you, but I rebuilt it without you. And I like this one better. Goodbye, Claire." I folded the letter and burned it in the fire. Then I walked upstairs, washed my face, and smiled at the woman in the mirror. She was not just surviving anymore. She was glowing. Fall arrived slowly, softening the heat of summer with cool evenings and golden leaves that danced along the sidewalk. Our warehouse now buzzed with energy. We had hired new warehouse staff, expanded our product line, and signed a distribution deal that would land Everglow in over 50 boutique stores nationwide. But for every success, there was a shadow that lingered. One of my team members forwarded me a strange email. An anonymous message warning us to double-check our supply chain. 2 days later, one of our ingredient shipments arrived half-filled, labels tampered with. The supplier swore it was a clerical error. But I knew better. Daniel's signature strategy was sabotage cloaked in coincidence. And Evelyn? She preferred to send a storm and claim it was just weather. I called our logistics manager and moved suppliers. Quietly, efficiently, without warning. We pivoted. We adapted. We kept shining. But then something personal happened. One Friday evening, I stopped by my old neighborhood market. The clerk recognized me, smiled warmly. And then, behind me, I heard the familiar voice. "Claire?" I turned. Daniel. He looked different, slimmer, tired, but still dressed like a man clinging to the remnants of importance. In his hands, a bouquet of white lilies. "They're for my mother," he said, as if I had asked. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. You look amazing." I didn't flinch. "Thank you. Is there something you want?" He hesitated. I was hoping we could grab coffee. Just talk. No expectations. I almost laughed. I am not someone you schedule between errands, Daniel. And there is nothing left to talk about. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You made a choice. And now I live with mine. You should go. He did. I stood there for a moment, then picked up a bottle of wine and a bouquet of wildflowers for myself. Because some evenings deserve celebration, even when they are quiet. The next morning, I received news from Jason. The board at Daniel's new venture, a skincare competitor trying to mimic Everglow's model, had ousted him. Lawsuits were brewing. Investors were pulling out. Evelyn had been quietly removed from her position as an advisor after multiple harassment complaints. The empire they tried to steal from me was now turning to ash in their hands. I did not smile. I simply closed my laptop and whispered to the room, balance. Because revenge was never the goal. Peace was. That weekend, I stood on stage at a Women in Business conference. Thousands of women filled the seats. As I stepped into the light, I looked out and saw Melanie in the second row, beaming. I took the mic. I used to think being strong meant staying quiet. But it doesn't. Being strong means speaking up, walking away, starting over, and building something no one can take away. Applause thundered. I smiled, not because they believed in me, but because I finally believed in myself. After the conference, I spent the evening in solitude. Not lonely, just full. The kind of fullness that comes from alignment, when your life finally reflects who you are. I walked barefoot across the polished floors of my apartment, journal in hand, and lit a single candle on the kitchen island. As the flame flickered, I wrote the words, I did not win him back. I won myself forward. The next morning, my assistant came in with wide eyes and breathless energy. Claire, you need to see this. She handed me her phone. On it was a trending video, Evelyn shouting at reporters outside a courthouse, red-faced and defiant. The caption read, Former advisor of Skin Corp faces ethics investigation. Multiple claims surface. I sighed. I guess she finally ran out of people to silence, I murmured. But this was not my victory lap. I handed the phone back and returned to my desk. My calendar was full, new hires to meet, a licensing deal to review, and a podcast interview with Forbes. I was moving on. Because that is what women do. We move forward, carrying both the scars and the strength. That evening, I got a surprise visit. It was Daniel's sister, Elise. She had always been kind, softer than the rest of them, a woman caught in the undertow of her mother's controlling tides. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, she said. For all of it. For not speaking up sooner. For not warning you. I offered her tea and listened. She told me about her own quiet rebellion, how she had left home, cut ties, and was working with a nonprofit helping women escape emotional abuse. You inspired me, she said. You showed me it's possible. I felt tears rise, but this time they were not from pain. They were from connection. We sat and talked until the sun dipped behind the skyline. Two women who had survived the same storm. One who had rebuilt, the other who had just begun. Later that week, I hosted a staff celebration at the new Everglow studio. Candles lit every table. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed through the hall. At one point, my lead designer stood and raised a toast. To Claire, she said, for reminding us that no one can steal the light meant for us. They cheered. I smiled. Not because I needed their applause, but because this time I believed it. Spring came slowly, but with it bloomed a kind of peace I had never known. The office was quieter now, not because we had slowed down, but because we had grown up. Systems were solid, leadership was shared, and the Everglow name was spreading beyond borders. I spent my mornings walking along the coast, barefoot in the sand, breathing in the freedom I had earned. I no longer felt the urge to check headlines, track court filings, or wonder if Daniel would try again. That version of him was a shadow, and I had long stepped into the sun. One afternoon, I received a letter. Not an email, a real letter. Handwritten. The return address was from a women's shelter in Montana. It was from a woman named Celeste, who had heard me speak at a conference months ago. "You do not know me," she wrote, "but I left after 20 years because of your story. Because you said, you can love someone and still choose yourself. I did. I chose me. Thank you." I cried. Not because of sadness, but because stories, when shared, can become bridges. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at an international summit in Amsterdam. As I boarded the flight, I brought only one carry-on, a notebook, and a necklace my grandmother once gave me with a tiny golden compass. "So you never forget where you're going," she used to say. When I landed, a car met me with my name on a sign. Claire Montgomery, keynote speaker. It did not feel surreal. It felt deserved. In the green room, I stood in front of a mirror. I saw the same eyes, the same mouth, but everything else had changed. The sadness was gone, replaced by softness, strength, and something I never thought I would find again, joy. My name was called. Applause greeted me. I stepped onto the stage. "My name is Claire," I said, "and I was once left behind on what should have been my honeymoon. I was betrayed by the man I loved, and by the woman who raised him. But that story is not what defines me. What defines me is what I did next." I paused, letting the silence settle. I built something beautiful. Not out of revenge, but out of vision. I forgave. Not because they deserved it, but because I did. And I moved forward. Not because it was easy, but because I finally believed I was worth the life I dreamed of. The crowd stood. And I knew then this was the ending I had written. Not with fury, but with freedom. That night, I walked along the Amsterdam canals alone, the soft glow of the city reflected on the water. I called Elise, just to hear her voice. She was doing well, engaged now, studying social work. "I named our scholarship after you," she said. "The Claire Fund, for women rebuilding their lives." I closed my eyes. The girl who once waited at the airport, holding 2 tickets and a hopeful heart, would never have believed any of this. But the woman I had become? She knew. She had earned every single step of it. And she was still just getting started.